Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Mauve Coaching Podcast, where we talk all things health and fitness, emotional mental health, career chats, travelling, life in general, to be honest, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. So this is episode 3, where I'll be talking about why I moved to Bali. And to be honest, I have a lot to say and not a lot of time to say it, so I'm just going to get stuck right in. So here we go. So as you all know, if you listen to the first 2 episodes and follow me on my Mauve Coaching Instagram, oh, there's a fly. Bali life. Nope. Move. Okay. If you're listening to this and you don't know what just happened there was a fly in my face, which you think I'd be accustomed to by now, but to be honest, it never gets less annoying. Anyway, sidetrack. You probably have a gist of the reasoning why I moved here business-wise, because I've kind of touched on it briefly, but not in depth. And I think it's something that needs to be addressed because a lot of people don't really know why Bali, especially from a business standpoint. And I think had it been 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, moving here for business wouldn't really have made much sense because Bali and 𝘧𝘴, which is where I'm based, wasn't really established as, I guess you could say, a business hub. It's coined Silicon Valley for a reason, obviously pun on Silicon Valley, for remote working. It's something that I actually never would have personally even imagined in my wildest dreams that it'd be based in Bali for business reasons as well as other reasons, which I'll get into later. But it is something that, as I said, has become more of a business hub for remote working in recent years because of all the benefits attached to it in terms of lifestyle, cost of living. Sun obviously is a big major factor. However, in saying that, it's been pissing down the last, ever since I moved here, no joke, when I was coming home from the airport, I say home being my accommodation here, I got drenched. So I was like, okay, so this is going to be a different Bali experience to when I was here earlier this year because it was not rainy season, but that's just tropical life for you. You're going to have downpours of rain every now and then it's beautiful the next few hours of the day. So it's fine. It's a good balance. Still better than freezing Ireland at the best of times. However, it's very humid. Anyway, as I said, Silicon Valley is the name that people coin Bali, in particular 𝘧𝘴, for a reason. And that's because it's very nurturing of an entrepreneurial spirit. And a lot of people, including myself, never would have considered themselves an entrepreneur. But I think when I came here earlier this year and I met so many inspiring people doing what I'm doing now or in similar industries or this remote working, online work in general, I realized that I had very limiting beliefs about myself and my potential. As a Sagittarius, I'm very free-willed, very fiercely independent, which is something that I lost for years because of maladaptive coping mechanisms from wounds as a child, growing up, from my past. But I've come home to that. I'm much more independent, back to my real, authentic self, and it's an amazing feeling which I never want to lose. So a goal of mine since as long as I can remember, probably since I got serious about school and college, and I had this corporate career trajectory laid out for me by society, by all key influential people in my life. All I freaking wanted was to be a CEO. And I remember in recent years when people asked me why did I want to be a CEO? I was stumped. I didn't have an answer for them. I was like, because I want to be a badass bitch. And I didn't really have any meaning attached to it at the time. All I knew is that I was very driven, still am, wanted to be the best at what I did, still do, and wanted to be the top of my game because I'm just a very competitive person, I guess you could say, and I wanted to excel. I want to live a fulfilling life, right? And in my eyes, when I was growing up until recently, to be honest, maybe last year, I was kind of trapped in this mindset that I wanted to be CEO, wanted to climb the corporate ladder, not to knock that or anything. That's very much a legitimate ambition and desire or goal. However, in recent times, obviously, especially in this last year, I've redefined what that meant for me. And for me, as I said, as a fiercely independent Sagittarius, if you're not into star signs, it's my sun star sign, will mean nothing to you, but basically it just helps you understand somewhat, to a certain degree, who you are innate as a person. And As a person who loves to travel, also Sagittarius trait, I realized that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be my own boss, which in itself has its own set of challenges, a different form of grind, and both are equally, I think, incredibly admirable. However, this one has meaning for me, whereas the other one didn't. So that's just something I wanted to clear up from the get-go. And when I was here in April to June, I made moves towards getting myself to this point where I am now. And I remember I was in this co-working space and literal strangers came up to me and high-fived me, fist bumped me, don't know which one it is, and were like, go you for doing that, because they were once in that position too. They know what it felt like to make that first scary step towards your dream life, essentially. And I remember just being like, what the hell? Why are these people like congratulating me at the time when I had made a very risky, bold decision, which is not, or was not at the time, in my nature as a very risk-averse person because of anxiety. It was terrifying, but it was very consoling that these people were like, no, go you made the right decision. And I look back now and I'm like, they were right, okay, we're fine. I'm glad that they gave me that, I guess, external validation that I kind of needed at that time to be like, no, you're making the right decision, even though they were strangers and they didn't know me. Because of that, and because all the amazing people that I met when I was last here, which I'm still in contact with, still see, I knew that I needed to come back here to continue this journey or even embark on this journey, because it's still very much in its infancy. It just felt like I had this massive draw to come back here. I just knew I needed to come back here to be in this supportive, encouraging environment where people got me. They knew what, as I said, what I was going through. They've been there themselves. And thank God I did, because honestly, starting your own business has a lot of challenges, as you can imagine. And some of them, especially as someone who suffers with imposter syndrome, can really, really put you to the test in terms of your resilience, in terms of your willpower, in terms of your belief in yourself, that you can do it. And these are all things that I really struggled with even just earlier this year. So had I not been here, surrounded by people who had been there themselves, who are supportive, who are encouraging, who want to see you thrive, want to see you grow, I don't honestly know, I can't tell you if I would be here right now, still doing what I'm doing in terms of like, or at least still doing what I'm doing at the level I'm doing it, because it really did accelerate my business from a point, as I said, of infancy and very much in its like inception. Like it had barely started by the time I moved here to the point it is now. And I think if I were back home, which I'll get into later, I would have been in a far more comfortable position to have quitted myself. I would have had other people's limiting beliefs about myself and about life in general and what career is meant to look like permeate my mind, basically intoxicate my mind, which without intention, without any malintentions, that I would have probably just been like, fuck it, throw in the towel. Essentially, this is all hypothetical. I just think that I would have probably doubted myself far more than had I been here, which I am, in an environment where people were like, I've been there, girl, okay? No, this is exactly the point. Like I said, I came onto my stories literally probably a month ago now, maybe even longer. Because I've been here nearly, September? Oh my God, it's been 2 and a bit months. So I came here 2 and a bit months ago, and it was around 3 weeks in, like I was already starting to be like, fuck, because I expect results like immediately, okay? That's just my all or nothing toxic trait, and that's something that I'm working on, and I actually help clients work on as well, because I relate to it, I know what it's like, and I've come a long way, believe you me, but it's still something that's still deeply ingrained in me. And I think, as I said, I would have thrown in the towel like freaking a month in. I would say Bali was a catalyst and continues to be a catalyst to me, my business and its growth. So that's why I knew I had to come back here, and I was right. So that's very comforting that, once again, if you trust in your gut feeling, your intuition, it most likely will lead you to where you're meant to be. So I think it's safe to say I made the right decision. And even I met with my friend today. She actually flew in from, well, she was living in New York, but she's here for a business trip, Bali. freaking benefits of corporate life right there, okay? And she was like, no, like all of us can see that this was the right decision for you. And I think it's until you make the decisions and actually have a little bit of time to show people, not that it's about proving to other people that you made the right decision, it does help when people kind of support you. They're like, no, we all see why this is the right decision for you, and they've never seen me happier. So honestly, best decision I made. You have to have skin in the game. You have to put yourself in a position where you're like all or nothing, in a sense, where you have to back yourself. You're putting yourself in a state where you have to rely on no one else but yourself. You got to risk it for a chocolate biscuit, okay? That's my favourite saying because I love chocolate. Don't really like biscuits that much though. And then in addition to the business side of things, I knew I had to come back here from a personal growth standpoint. So when I was here in, as I said, April to June, yeah, it was around, I'm going to say mid-May, I set an intention doing this ritual where it was about healing my inner child. It was just, I didn't know how else to phrase it. It was very, in my eyes, broad at the time, but I just knew that's what I needed to do. It was all the issues that I was experiencing in my life, in career, any sort of relationship, platonic, so friendships, familial relationships, like your family members, romantic relationships, everything. I knew all linked back to like inner child wounds and the need to heal them. And I've spoken about it before. So for me, fear of abandonment, I think I spoke mainly about it on Kate Coaching Podcast. If you don't listen or follow, go do. She's my queen. She's my bestie out here. And I wouldn't be doing this pod if it weren't for her. So love you, Kate. But I spoke about it on her podcast a little bit, but I'll delve into a bit more here. But I have, or had, less so now because I've been working so much on healing it, but probably still a lot longer to go, a fear of abandonment that stemmed from things in my childhood that I won't really get into because there's no real need. It's something you can look up yourself if you think you can relate to it. But because of this fear of abandonment, as I said, kind of affected all aspects of my life and led me to be a very unhappy person in myself, deeply insecure, lacking any self-worth, self-love. And essentially, because of my fear of abandonment, I essentially got to a point where I was abandoning myself. I wasn't taking care of myself. As I said, I would self-sabotage. And for me, moving back here on my own as well this time, and actually moving here, because the last time I was here on a holiday, it turned into 2 months. I wanted to learn to trust myself, to trust my intuition, to trust in my capabilities, that I can pull through, I can achieve what I put my mind to. Because even though I did it in the past, I didn't truly believe it. Like all the years in college when I would get all the grades that I wanted and above, like I always overachieved actually, which was the ironic part, because even then when I did overachieve or get more than I even anticipated or dreamed of, I still didn't believe in myself. So I think for me, a huge part of moving back here was to be in a position where I'm financially independent, I'm living abroad on my own, I'm starting my own business, all these different variables which are terrifying, don't get me wrong, to throw yourself in the deep end when you're going through a healing journey. It has helped and continues to help me trust myself and my intuition, which is something that I never did. And that's actually something that I came to realize doing a woman's circle. So that's a part of my healing journey personally here, has been attending women's circles. And on top of my fear of abandonment wound, I realized even when I was last year, I went to my very first women's circle, and this was when I was in a very low mental state, like probably the worst state I've ever been in. This was actually post-breakup, post-quitting my job, post everything, kind of feeling like out of control, and for a control freak that was terrifying. And I was at my lowest of lows, and I went to my first women's circle, and I remember thinking, or even I said it, I spoke it out loud to the women's circle and everyone who was there, that this was my first time feeling safe in a group of females. And that was when I realized that I had a sister wound. So you've probably all heard of a father wound, a mother wound. Sister wound is something that I'd personally never heard of. So that was something that I looked into further and didn't really get much opportunity to work on when I was back in Ireland for those 4 months. However, since coming back, I've attended these women's circles again in a different environment. So the first time was in 𝘬𝘓𝘪, this time was in my local 𝘪𝘴 with the girls that I'm friends with here. And honestly, it's always timed and we all need it the most. And they tried to time them during like a new moon phase or, you know, in line with the spiritual ongoings. And every time I leave it and I feel more connected to my fellow females, and it's such an empowering feeling and comforting feeling for me. Something that I don't want to obviously get into too much because I'm not going to be using this podcast to like out anyone. That's never going to be my intention because I have processed a lot of the things from my past and healed and moved on in the last year, more so than before. I had a lot of issues with girls, I would say in the past, but like even up until like college years, really nasty rumors, just girls, like fellow females with competitive streaks, which I can relate to, but I never related to the bitchiness. I was never a bitchy girl, like even back in when I was 11, say when we start into secondary school, I never felt like I fit in because I never wanted to be part of that group of girls that would be knocking other girls down. It just felt really wrong. So when that happened to me, it hurt me even further because I'm quite a sensitive person, very sensitive person. And even predating that, I had issues with girls in primary school. I was bullied, like a lot of girls experienced that. I know I'm not alone. Everyone kind of goes through a period in their life where they were teared down by their fellow females or men. Whoever's listening, I'm sure it relates to everyone, not just gender specific. But like even when I was like 10, maybe even younger, I had like this one best friend and we were like stuck at the hip, and suddenly one day she didn't want anything to do with me. And this was back when we were kind of starting to become more aware of how we looked, like our appearance. And I found out that the reason was because her mother told my mother that we couldn't be friends anymore because I was making her feel insecure about her appearance. Something completely out of my control, okay? So then I, growing up, started to become insecure about my appearance. And that affected my confidence greatly. I felt like my appearance was actually a weakness as opposed to a strength or just an objective fact, like how I looked. I can't control how I look, you know? So that was something that up until recently I felt really disempowered by. I started to view other girls as competition because of that, because that's what I was kind of being taught growing up, that you got to take each other down, you're not meant to support each other, you're competition essentially. And that's the sister wound for me, at least. And the Women's Circle has massively helped me heal that, as well as like the girls that I've met here. Honestly, it's been, I don't want to get upset about this because it's honestly been such a freaking relief to finally understand like what it's like to have a big group of girls. Like I've had, obviously don't get me wrong, I have friends that are girls, but I always had like small groups of girls or like one-on-one friends. And I have my friends from secondary school, which I still love dearly, one of which is here in Bali with me. However, I've never been in a situation where this level of like support, of encouragement, of no comparison, no self-serving objectives, just well-intended friendships. They want to see you grow, they want to see you thrive. So that's been really helpful for me healing a wound I didn't even know I freaking had. So that's been amazing. And just then coming back to that personal healing side of things, learning to live by myself and enjoy my own company, because that's something I really, really struggled with and I didn't realize I did because of my, as I said before, maladaptive coping mechanisms growing up. I became a very codependent person, okay? So what happened for me was whatever romantic relationship I was in or platonic relationships or friendships, whoever I was closest to, they almost became part of me, an extension of me. And as a Sagittarius, I'll go back to that, that's so misaligned with who I am at my core. So I really wanted to come home to that. That's a huge part of why I moved back here, was because I wanted to come home to this reality of I love my own company, I know how to live by myself, I know how to take care of myself, and I don't need anyone. I don't obviously ideally I have a support network, and I have my gals both at home and here, got my family, but it's something that I never want to lose again, because holy fucking shit, it's so liberating not needing anyone, not expecting anything from anyone but myself, okay? And that's something that I don't think I've ever had, and I don't want to ever lose again. So let's just say this, okay? I'm not looking for any sort of romantic relationships right now. My focus is very much on me, healing myself, working my business, on that grind. And if I happen to meet someone along the way, like, I'll leave that one up to fate, because I'm not looking. I will go with the flow. And that's something that I also am trying to learn. Just go with the freaking flow, Mauve. It's really not that hard. That is life. The power of now. I feel like you're gonna see, when I laugh, I didn't realize that I kind of spit, but these freaking lights make you realize a lot of things about yourself. Let's just say that. Another reason that I felt like I was drawn to Bali, and I felt like I had to leave Ireland essentially, was because I felt like it was holding me back. It felt like Ireland was almost rejecting me, and I kind of felt that way my whole life. Like, I remember even saying when I was a kid, I was born in England, fun fact, Windsor Castle. That's my best English accent for you. I left when I was like 3, okay, so it's gonna be shocking. Please, no judgment, okay? Any English listeners, any of my English friends, don't come at me. So I always thought when I was younger, I was like, oh, because of the issues I had with girls growing up, they were actually quite detrimental to my mental health. And I just always imagined or fantasized about what my life would have been like if I'd lived in England. And then as I got older, I more dreamed about moving to Australia, which I did for a year, and which I still do want to go back to, because that's actually where I envisioned and had planned to go. But then the pandemic obviously put a spanner in the works in that one. However, everything happens for a reason. So I'm glad that I didn't actually go then. However, always wanted to leave Ireland. Never felt like I belonged there. And I don't know if that's just something in my head. In saying that, I do know that there's some truth to that, which I'll get into after this, about listening to that gut feeling, essentially, which I also like to look at as your frequency, which I'll talk about now. But especially when I went home for those 4 months between my Bali 1 and Bali 2 experience, say, let's call them that, I felt even more like, get me out of here. Like, in terms of what, don't get me wrong, okay, this is not me shitting on Ireland. I love Ireland deeply. I'm so proud to be Irish, like, you've no idea. However, there was something about it was almost like the culture and somewhat the people as well. I felt like kind of misaligned with where I was at. And to be honest, I think it's the best way to put it is, while I love Ireland dearly and will always hold a special place in my heart for the country, the people, on the flip side of that, I think the mindset and the culture and the people by and large felt misaligned with me, especially in those last 4 months. So I felt like to do what I needed to do, both business-wise and personally, in terms of my growth, I needed to leave. So just to touch on like the business reasons, say for example, I think I know I'm not naive, I'm not ignorant. I know that a lot of people, strangers, close family and friends, were skeptical. And to be fair, warranted to a certain extent, because it was kind of a 180 for me. However, while some degree of skepticism and, you know, challenging your decisions is healthy, and you shouldn't always make your decisions on a whim, on your own, without any external feedback playing in, it's just about the value you place on that feedback. And I knew, as I said, deep down in my gut, my core, my intuition, I needed to leave. So no matter what people said to me, while I understood where they were coming from and still do, I decided against it. I went with my gut. Thank God I did, because everything has been looking up for me by and large since. While warranted, it sometimes other onlookers, like even strangers, like I could feel people, like I could see people. Also, just to let you guys know, we can see when you're having a nice little stalk of the page and not supporting, which I don't expect support from everyone. However, there were people that either were strangers or people I barely knew, people who, as I said before, which I'm not even going to get into, would start lovely rumours about me, having a little creep. And it was that kind of external pressure, almost felt like people were wanting to see me fail. And I know that's somewhat in my head, and I view it less like that now because I have healed and I'm more secure in myself and my decisions and where I'm going with my life. But at the time when I was kind of going through the ringer, it was really getting to me. It was toxic in the sense that it was leading me to second guess my decisions. And I think had I stayed, it would have really held me back from my potential. So healing wise, I also knew that I had to leave Ireland and was particularly drawn to Bali for this because of its healing properties and nature, which I'm sure you guys have probably heard of if you've ever looked up Bali. It's a very spiritual place because of where it's situated in terms of its ley lines, and it's called the Island of Gods for a reason. So it's very hybrid actually in nature, and if you think about it, because it's great for business, Silicon Valley, great for personal growth and healing from anything and everything. So I knew I had to come back here because when I did go home and I was kind of in the deep, dark depths of my healing, it was really hard for me to establish foundations when I was in a situation that I felt like I was being held back. Because if you think about it, I know Ireland's come a long way in many respects in terms of mental health and like recognising it as a major problem in Ireland and the services that are available. However, I think we still have a long, long way to come. And I know other people that I've met out here have actually spoken on this topic. So it very much confirms my beliefs about where Ireland's at in terms of mental health. And I think my holistic approach to healing, which was all about nervous system regulation and continues to be. And I think that and what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go in terms of healing from the past and processing my feelings was ridiculed to some extent by people around me, and I felt like it was really knocking me down and once again leading to self-doubt. And you can't really blame them because a lot of the time, especially the older generations, they're a product of a different society, right? And we are working as millennials or Gen Zers or even whatever the feckin' generation is after that. I probably should know that. We are working on healing generational trauma, and it starts with us. By and large, in my opinion, I think a lot of people of our generation came to these realizations of their own that they needed to work on themselves a lot before they even considered settling down, blah, blah, blah. So I had to kind of leave Ireland to continue on this journey, and I'm glad I did in that sense as well, because while I have kind of slacked a little bit on the intentional work, so I wanted to do more kind of spiritual activities or excursions in the sense that there's like temples you can go to, there's spiritual healers you can go to. I have done a lot of work along the way unintentionally, such as journaling every day, because that's kind of part of like the bigger picture for me, not just healing emotionally, but also focusing on goals and the likes. But also the women's circles I go to, they are intentional essentially too. So it's just kind of easy to get caught up over here. There's so many different things going on. You kind of feel like you're running out of time at the best of times. So yeah, I'm happy with the progress I've made in that regard, but I definitely do want to spend more time in the coming months doing more intentional healing work. I guess it's kind of sad to think that I had to leave Ireland, or I felt like I had to leave Ireland at least, to do what I'm doing now and to realise my own potential and to heal and grow, because but I also think at the same time, it's not abnormal. It's probably kind of common of every country, not just particularly Ireland. As I said, love Ireland. I don't want anyone to perceive this as me as shitting on it or hating on it. I think it's especially, however, from a small town or country mindset, difficult to do both of what I have spoken about so far. So growing my online business as well as growing and healing personally. So I think in my case, I felt drawn to Bali and had to leave Ireland, and always kind of felt that way, as I said. However, just to disclaim, or just to preface all that, that's not to say that that's the recipe to happiness, okay? It's actually something I saw one of my friends just post about just the other day, And the quote was, wherever you are, there you are. And that one really hit home with me because it's so true. Like, I went home for those 4 months and I set the foundations. I did a lot of intentional work then. I did my own nervous system regulation work in terms of yogic breath work, mindfulness practices, restorative yoga, all these things that healed my nervous system, which for me has been a massive reason that I feel safer in myself, not hypervigilant, secure, stable, regulated, emotionally healthy. And I did all that work when I was at home with the intention of coming back to Bali when I felt ready. And after around 4 months, I felt then was the time. And even then, I actually wanted to come sooner, but I knew I needed to wait a little bit longer to kind of have some sort of foundations to move abroad. I needed to be in a more of a secure space mentally and emotionally to pack up my bags and move to the side of the world on my own. So while it might seem like to others I just quit my job on a whim, potentially to others that don't know me personally, and move country as like a quick fix, like that's by no means the reality. However, at the time, I definitely viewed it as that. I'm not gonna lie to you. I saw Bali as my savior, and I think there is some truth to it because it has been. However, you don't want to put a lot of pressure on an event or I'll be happy when complex, okay? Because you have to learn to be happy in the present moment. So for me, a large part of that was also, while I was somewhat unhappy in my situation back in Ireland for those 4 months, I learned to romanticize my life a little bit more. So finding pleasure in things like the little things that I would have once glossed over, things like that really helped me get to a point where I didn't need Bali, but I knew I wanted it and it would help me. So that's just something I want to say, is that meet yourself where you are now and look internally as opposed to externally for, I guess, progress or happiness and fulfillment, because wherever you are, there you are. Just to kind of give some sort of advice, if this means anything to anyone, I don't want to come across as being, you do this, I know everything, because obviously I don't know everything, but I do think I've learned a lot, especially in the last year, is that for me, something I've even spoken about on Instagram this week was you will have to overcome your fear of change, okay? And that is something that I massively struggled with. Like, even though my reality for so long, for such a large part of my life, was not a happy one, when I reflect on it, there's a sense of comfort in an uncomfortable situation for you because it's familiar. So if that's discontentment, lacking fulfillment, pain, misery, whatever it may be, it's still familiar to you. Coming back to your nervous system, it's something that your nervous system is familiar with. So for me, actually, for example, a sense of stability and calm actually triggered my nervous system because that was unfamiliar to it. I didn't know what that felt like because it was unfamiliar, because it was different. I actually weirdly felt more anxious, more stressed. And that kind of makes sense because when I reflect on romantic relationships from the past few years, I felt most anxious and hypervigilant when things were going well. And that's when I would self-sabotage because I was like, no, this is foreign to me. This is weird. Things are going too well. Red button, self-sabotage. Press that shit. Obviously, I don't do that anymore because I have become aware of these tendencies, and a massive part of that journey, which I'll touch on now, is about journaling. Just going back to the fear of change component of this in terms of what you might have to overcome or at least embrace or learn to embrace, is that you might find that you're in a situation in your life where there's not a whole lot of joy and there's kind of more misery or just lacking any sort of passion or excitement. And not to say that all life or all aspects of life have to be thrilling and exciting. Like, there is beauty in the mundane in that sense. There are positives to stability. Don't get me wrong, okay? I love stability, so this is why all the decisions I've made this year are very rogue to onlookers, okay? However, I found stability in myself. I've found and built, very much built, actually, a home in myself. And that is my stability. I am my own anchor, as well as my gals out here. They've been a massive support network for me to turn to when I feel a little bit wobbly. However, to get to that point, I had to lean into this fear that's built into us. It's an innate survival mechanism that we rely on as humans to survive, as I said. Survival mechanism, self-explanatory. So it makes sense that humans fear change, some lesser than others. So if you're more anxiously inclined, like I would be, all you see are the 101 things that can go wrong. And that is both a blessing and a curse, more so a curse, but a blessing in the sense that like I would see all the potential shortcomings or potential things that would go tits up, and I would focus on them. But when they did materialize, because I guess what you look at and what you focus on will materialize and be realized because of that. If you're only looking for the negative in situations, they're gonna show up. Is that I was prepared. So I was always like, I proved you right. Like, who the hell am I proving right? I'm proving that I have a negative mindset, or at least I used to. So if you start leaning into that fear a little bit more, knowing full well going into it that there are going to be obstacles, that's life. It's not plain sailing. However, when you overcome these obstacles, which I had to do a lot of this year, you start to learn to back yourself, trust your intuition, and the benefits do come to the forefront eventually. And it doesn't get easier, you just get stronger. And this kind of goes back to something, as I said, I wanted to touch on about frequencies, something that I saw on, I'm not gonna lie, it was TikTok. I don't post on TikTok really, something I need to get into, but it is something that I love watching at the end of the night for like 5 minutes, scrolling through, because my For You page is very accurate. And one thing was about frequencies and how, stripped back to the basics, we all operate from a place of our frequency. So that's kind of, I guess, in layman's terms, would be your mood. So for a large part of my life, I was operating from a frequency that was mainly anxious, depressed, angry, whatever it may be. And ideally, you'll operate from a place of excitement, passion. And if you feel those things, you're on the right track, you're in alignment, you're heading the right way, things will start to work out for you, okay? But because I was operating in this place, or from this place of anxiety, sadness, anger, it's like a self-reinforcing loop. If you start to view that as like your internal sat-nav, so your moods are so important to listen to, because had I listened to my moods for all those years, I would have potentially made moves earlier than I did to work on healing and working on myself, because they were trying to tell me something. They were trying to guide me to a reality that I've now woken up to, was that I wasn't happy in what I was doing. I never felt like I was making decisions for me, by me, and that in itself undermined my sense of capabilities or belief in myself, so my imposter syndrome. And I woke up to this internal frequency and sat-nav being like, wake up, you are not happy, make a change. And once I made that change, while I didn't realize this is what I was doing at the time, as I said, this is only something that I've kind of reflected on recently and found a word for when I saw that TikTok by someone who's established in, I guess, the science world. I'm not very scientific. However, didn't know I was doing it at the time. But if you try your best to move to a place of, like, sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. And that's not a saying I used to like, because I always wanted to feel and live authentically. So I never wanted to pretend to be something that I wasn't. But I essentially had to do it because I wasn't happy earlier this year when I came to this realization, obviously, came to that realization that I wasn't happy. And I had to essentially move myself to a point of, no, things will get better. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Keep trying to be positive. Alongside, as I said, nervous system regulation and healing myself, nurture a positive growth mindset. And essentially, you start putting one foot in front of the other. You get on like a roll. If you start with just the intention of riding that positivity wave for a few days, you're more likely to stick it out. And it become how you think and how you feel. And yeah, I find myself like in cafes, sitting on my own, listening to my music, just dancing when I'm riding my bike. I'm like there singing along to myself. And these are all things that like I used to look at people and be like, what freaking high are they on? Like how are they so happy? Because I was so deeply ingrained in this negative mindset or frequency that I just didn't understand how people could be happy. And that kind of goes back to the point that when I was here in Bali earlier this year, going back to that quote, I kind of forget it now, wherever you are, there you are. Definitely butchered that again. Go back, rewind, look it up if I got that wrong. When I was in Bali earlier this year, I wasn't happy. And people used to say to me, how are you unhappy in Bali? Because I wasn't happy in myself. So you have to work on your internal environment before your external environment can be appreciated. And now I find beauty in all these things that I'm going to sound like a hippie to some of you. And I'm okay with that, because honestly, it took me a long time to get here. So you guys can judge me, don't care, because I'm happy. I never thought it was possible for me, because I am a very melancholic person, nostalgic, and with that comes kind of the tendency to be a little bit more, as I said, melancholic. So you see the sadness in things a bit more. I have a sensitive nervous system too. So things like that made me believe that I would never get to this point of, as I said, riding on my bike, singing to myself, just things like that, being generally content in life. So I'm not going to apologise for my current state, because it took me a long time to get here. But if you're not there yet, know that you can. There is light at the end of the tunnel, even especially when you feel like there isn't. Because I was reflecting on my journal. Let's go. Love that. A place to let my thoughts flow with my little heart, or my best attempt at it, because I'm not very artistic. I was reflecting on my journal earlier this week, okay? And this is something I've actually also spoken about in my stories recently too, was that I used to view journaling as like almost like a band-aid solution, in the sense that I was never able to stick to it, because it would be more of like an emergency tool I would deploy, to put it very analytically, to help me cope with the emotions, not process. Just when I really felt like I had nothing else to rely on, I would put pen to paper. However, it would always be short-lived. I would do one journaling entry and that was that, throw my book under the bed, never to be seen again. I don't even want to think about the amount of journals that I have started and stopped, because it's actually quite sad. But I never really stuck to it, because I think, to be honest, a lot of that would be to do with the fact that I never saw myself worthy subconsciously of being taken care of, let alone by myself. Very little self-worth, as I said, self-love. So I wasn't in a place where that was something that I could stick to. And I also approached it in a way that it was like I needed to be the best at it. I wanted to know what strategy to do, because of my background in like business. Everything had to be done perfectly or not at all. So because I didn't know how to do it really, and I got overwhelmed by the idea of it, I just throw in the towel. And now, so I started journaling, I'd say consistently since May. So what's that? May, June, July, August, September, October, November. 7 months now of consistent journaling, give or take a few off weeks, because life sometimes gets in the way. And especially when, this is something I realised, is that I was falling victim to that trap of using it as an emergency tool, as opposed to reflecting on the highs and the lows, not just the lows, because it's so nice to look back on as well. And that's something that, like, even which I'll look on now with my first entry, it helps you see how far you came, or helps you just appreciate and find positivity in the small things. And I essentially have become a more grateful person because of it. So it helps me document the highs. But most importantly, I think for me, it helps me document the lows in a way that is, I wouldn't say effective, because it's not about being effective. But for me, I used to really struggle with identifying or understanding what I was feeling. So for example, say I was feeling sad, jealous, whatever the negative emotion may be. Firstly, I wouldn't even recognize that. I would just feel awful. I didn't even know how to label or name or identify that primary emotion. But where still I would then, because I didn't identify or understand my emotions, it would then manifest in anger, which some call a secondary emotion, because usually there's an underlying negative emotion behind it, driving it. And for me, journaling has helped me understand what I'm really feeling. And because of that, I've been able to, in live situations, become more self-aware of situations where, say, insecurity is transmuting into anger. And that somewhat is a product of your external environment. So in my situation, I kind of learned that whatever you were feeling, whatever negative emotion, as like almost like a defense mechanism, I think, to be honest, should be exhibited in anger, passive aggression. And it's self-sabotage to essentially process any sort of negative emotion through anger, because it's not going to achieve anything and only leads to hurt both to you and other people. And that's not something I'm here for. I don't want to self-sabotage. So it's helped me be able to identify what's underneath that protective mask or armor of anger, say when I'm noticing that I'm self-sabotaging. So I'm still a little reluctant to reflect on my first journal, which I actually did bring to Bali with me so that I could look back on when I'm in a position to do so. And I think I am ready, but I actually just didn't bring it with me. I did bring my current one, which I use for both journaling and for like goal setting and everything. Intentions, all of the above. So let's really quickly reflect on this, because I have 3 minutes, before I'm kicked out of here. So this is my first entry, which was when I was traveling to Bali. I wanted to start a fresh journal for that. And just looking back on all like the buzzwords that I have down, like resilience, fearlessness, embracing uncertainty and unknown, backing myself, being persistent, maturing emotionally and mentally, deriving a sense of self-worth from internal validation, worrying less and feeling grateful more. All these things, like I can see the progress that I've made on that, and it's very empowering and motivating for me going forward. So that's one of the benefits of like reflecting on your old journal entries. And to be honest as well, it's a little bit emotional because I refer to myself in certain entries as Mini May, so like my younger self. And it's usually when I'm talking about things to my younger self. So I'm trying to help, say, heal, or I'm feeling wobbly. Or alternatively, when I'm feeling badass and I'm like, go you, I've done something that was once terrifying to me. So things like that are really nice to look back on. If you don't approach your journaling style that way, like everyone does things differently. Like sometimes I talk to my higher self. So I just like to like write it to someone like it's a letter sometimes, because I'm quite creative with my words. And it's actually something I never used to think. I thought I was never artistic or creative person growing up, and I'm definitely not artistic, sorry, let's just flag that. Can't draw even a stick man. However, my creativity would show up in words. So when I was here earlier this year and I was going through the ringer, I started writing poems, and they're probably shocking, but that's something I actually do want to get back into because it's very fun and therapeutic. However, one thing I would like to say is that for me, I find myself sometimes catching myself intellectualizing my emotions. So that's to say that I don't really let myself really truly feel the emotions. I want to go straight onto the proactive of how can I cope. And it's like this thing I saw once again on TikTok, and it was, if you're standing in a train track and a train is coming full speed ahead, how would you feel? And my response to myself was I would jump the feck out of the way, obviously dumb. And then the therapist on the other end of the TikTok was like, you have a tendency to intellectualize your emotions. I asked you, how did you feel, not what you do. So I do think there's a time and place to think proactively about things. However, even in the first week when I came to Bali, I found myself feeling quite low actually after, I think it was day 5, when the high was kind of starting to dissipate a little bit of being back. and reality sunk in that I was kind of suppressing some negative emotions that I was still holding on to. And I wasn't allowing myself to really feel them because I didn't want to fall off this positivity bandwagon essentially that I felt like I was on. But now I just know it's a way of life with ebbs and flows, like everything. I actually wrote a journal entry, and it was letting my thoughts flow. And once I let myself feel what I was feeling, like I was feeling anxious about certain things, angry about other things, and once I wrote it down, essentially word vomited on the page, then I was able to step back with a clear and logical mind and think, how can I better that? How can I improve those situations? So I think there's a time and place for both. However, because I do have a tendency to intellectualize them, I try to use my journaling as a way to just feel. And then maybe sometimes plan proactively, because that's just what I do. That is it from me today. I'm out of time. I was going to do a little Q&A segment, but I really don't have time because I know they're outside waiting, listening to me right now. So I'm going to wrap up here. But if you're still here listening to me, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for all your guys' support so far. And if you have any sort of topics or things you want me to talk on, questions, feel free to just message me on Instagram. Let me know what you think. If you like this, give it a little like, follow, subscribe, all that jazz. And I will continue to show up every week and talk to you guys about something that I believe to be valuable or something that I think I can give my 2 cents on. But that's all from me today and this week. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.